So, I know we're about to throw up with maps. There is one more, and I wanted to save this one to later because it is kind of like a 2-in-1. So there's both a black and white version of this, and there's also a color version of this. So, what... Before I get into this... Oh, perfect, beauty. You know what? Let's just talk about this Angon real quick, then we'll go right back to subsurface. Okay. Oh, jeez. Do you guys see this?
The picture, right?
Yeah, the picture. Okay. So this is an Angon all the way around, right? But in this situation, it works really well because it's locked to one plane. So it's not bending, it's not doing anything like that, and it has a connection point here and here and here and here. So it's giving information as to how these guys need to work, and that's a good example of an Angon. So it's actually kind of simplifying on the process. It's a good way to approach that. Anywho, we got this crazy mirroring thing. Okay, we're back. We're lost. Okay, so right back to subsurface maps. Let's take a guess at what a subsurface map is.
Beneath the skin?
That's a component to it, yeah. Anyone else?
Let's see. Is it? I don't know. Is it like dealing with something regarding to like heat or temperature, or something like that?
Kind of, but not
Does
really.
it have to do with light? The way the light interacts with skin?
Okay, we're getting really hot. Yeah, we're getting closer. Yeah, it's not just skin though.
It allows light. It's like allowing light to pass through the material, right?
Right.
Of the object.
Oh,
Yes,
nice.
yes, perfect. So, the reason why they made this is kind of a new map, but the reason why they made it is because calculating subsurface lighting is really hard on a computer. It typically, when it's done through ray tracing, I'm going to write that down as well because I have to explain that later. When it's typically done in a render and ray traced, it has to figure out the depth of the object and do all this calculating, and if it's a little bit see-through, it kind of has to figure out where light is going to poke out more and where light is not going to cut through. So that's heavy, right? So what a subsurface map can do is it can actually say, in an object, light will pass through these areas. It's like thinner, and if you look at the ears here, it's a great example because our ears behind a light with the cartilage and everything we have lets light pass through it, and because of the blood flow in our ears, it's kind of red, you know. So that is what makes our flesh look natural. So if you ever see really bad CGI in a movie, it's probably because they don't have subsurface turned on, and what can happen without subsurface is the skin will look like rubber instead of skin. Because what happens is light goes into your face, it penetrates the first layer, it kind of goes into the muscle a little bit, and there's veins and there's multiple layers of skin, all kinds of stuff, and it reflects back a bit of a different color, and the light kind of like it lights up some areas of your face in a way. So you can really notice it on leaves when you look through a leaf that is facing the direction of light. They kind of glow a beautiful kind of, it's right here on the right. It's a bit more of a green kind of really nice look to it. Things like porcelain is another great example where subsurface lighting is visible. Once you see it, you guys are literally going to go outside and you're going to be like, wow, look at the subsurface lighting on that leaf, and it's a real thing. So yeah, here we can see there's different amounts of subsurface and how it changes the look of the face. See, this is like very little subsurface on the left, and in my opinion, it looks very rubbery. This is a little bit too much on the right, and it looks unnatural. It looks like silicone almost. And then in the middle here, we have a good sweet spot where we have light passing through the object and light getting stuck in the object. And we have to remember, as light passes through an object, it's picking up characteristics of the color associated with it. So that is why there's two kinds of subsurface maps. Do we want to take a guess at what two kinds there is? And let's just think we just reviewed, channels of images, right? There's grayscale, there's color, there's normal maps like that utilize different things, right? So what kind of maps would we have, and why would we have two versions of them?
Would the color be either cavity or albedo?
There is a cavity component to it in albedo. I can see what you mean, where you mean it's lighting, but there's actually I'm just gonna kind of cut to the chase. There's a grayscale version of subsurface where it's just black and white, meaning dark here, light here, pass the color through. However, there's also a color version of a subsurface map, and Quixel uses it all the time with their Atlas assets for trees and things like that. But basically, why would we want a color version instead of just a black and white version?
From the pictures given, could it possibly deal with temperature in some sort of way? So depending on what the light source is?
Yes, absolutely. So when color goes into an object, it typically shifts hue a lot, right? So if we're looking at the ear, the color might have been a bit of a cool color going in. It might just be daylight temperature, and then when it hits the ear, it's passing through blood vessels and things like that, and it turns it very warm and orange. So in this area, we need to know that the color is going to be kind of reddy orange looking, right?
Also, if you have like a very stylized, very veiny creature with random blue veins that you want showing through, differentiate those.
Yeah.
Instead of having them all red or all taking the color of the skin, they can actually take the color of the veins.
Absolutely. So typically the black and white grayscale map refers to where the light is entering, right? Where the light can pass through, where the light can't, right? It's like the face or whatever is too thick in this spot. There's too much skull for light to go through. So then that would be black. And then if the ears, right? If we look at the ears on this part is white, so that means light can pass through. And then in that case, you can also use the color image to tell it what the light looks like going through it. So like Dylan was talking about, all those veins and stuff you see in leaves or characters, that is visible only when looking through the light. So if you ever do that thing where you take your phone and you turn on the torch and then you put your finger over top of it, take a look at, if you can do that right now, just try doing that, and you'll see your finger light up, and it looks crazy and orange. It's because of pure subsurface lighting. I don't know if you guys are trying that or not, but it's a really cool thing to do.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, do you see how it's like really orange?
Yeah, I do.
And typically a phone light is actually a cold light, but because it's passing through your finger, which has a lot of blood and all that, it actually comes out orange. So yeah, this is probably the most complicated of the maps in a way, because there's kind of like a lot of stuff going on. Like I would say normal maps are definitely not simple either, but
Which one it is. It's either the color version or the black and white version of subsurface maps, but one of them is called a subdermal.
Yeah. Okay. So subdermal might be.
I think that's the color one.
Yeah. One would be specific to the depth part of it, like where the light is able to come out of the object, and one would probably be specific to what the light looks like as it's going through. But in Unreal, I'm pretty sure it's just pop your subsurface map in here, and it uses the color version in Unreal. Do we have any questions of this map?
Nope.
Yeah? Okay, perfect.
Very good.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Right on. So we might or might not use it if we're doing things like trees. This adds a crazy amount of realism to trees to hook up a subsurface map. Just because, you know, there's a lot of times where you're looking kind of towards the light source, and then and if you're looking towards the light source and there's a leaf there, you want it to be lit up. Without a subsurface map, we don't get any of that. It looks kind of gross and rubbery, so we're just fully opaque. Okay, I'm making a note for a later class. Perfect. So, all right, next thing is tiling. We did talk about this, but I thought this image here kind of shows how it works. So if you notice, there's actually 9 of these images tiled over, and then the red spot here is the actual image itself. So it's set up in a way that it can repeat over and over and over and over. And when we use any textures, we typically want them to be tiled. Do we have any questions with that?
Just like pixel art.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's tiling. I thought this is kind of a good representation of that. It shows you the image itself in the red square, and the area around it. It kind of looks sort of like a bigger image in a way, because it's using optical illusions and fancy things to remove the seams. Now, where's the seam on this image?
The seam?
Yeah.
Is it seamless, or am I wrong?
It is seamless, but technically the seam would be here if you're trying to find it. However, because tiling is referred to as seamless, like you said, there shouldn't be a seam. So, yeah, good catch, because that's exactly what tiling is supposed to eliminate, is seams. So, if we move on to the next thing, I mentioned instancing before. Instancing allows us to have many versions of the same object. And if we're doing things like asteroids, we want it to be instanced. So I'll actually go ahead and pull up a video for you guys of that. Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to show the whole thing, but if you get an idea, there's a lot of asteroids here.
And check level of detail coloration, mesh level.
I'll just turn off the sound. So see, these are all the same type of object, and it's running really fast for an insane amount of geometry. It's quite impressive. So anyways, this guy talks about how to set up instancing. It's very advanced stuff. All we need to know right now is that instancing is a really good way to get the game engine or whatever you're working with to load a lot of the same object. So if the object hasn't changed, it's a good practice to instance it. That's about it. That's all we need to know. We don't need to dive into how it works or any of that. It's just basically a really efficient way to load in objects. Does that kind of make sense for you guys?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then there's quad and tri-corners. This is kind of going back to topology. If you look over here with the X, and then there's the check mark. This is a triangle corner. A triangle corner, typically, for a few things, and we'll know as we get into it, it's just kind of worse. Having a quad at the corner like this is a lot better. It allows for better edge flow, so then you can select around here like that. Yeah, that's all we need to know there. So then we talked about modular. This is actually what it looks like, and the idea with modular is it's related to the grid, and it uses snapping to be able to quickly make together scenes like this that are all lined up to the grid. Why? Can someone tell me why we want to use modular? What are these
levels?
What's the advantage of it?
You don't have to model an entire level, or is there?
That's pretty great. You don't have to model a whole thing. Objects will snap together perfectly, and you don't have to fiddle around with trying to get the position perfect, right? You don't have to try to line things up and
make iterations in engine just by moving parts around.
Yes, you can move parts around. You combine things. In our game, we use modular for almost everything because it's super important. You can see here there's a grid, and it looks like the scale is a little bit off, but if you look at this, these are all like individual parts, and you can grab a part, you can move it, and you can have a higher flexibility because the whole object isn't a piece, so it allows you to make one piece, and then it can work and play well with the others. Best way to explain it is if it's digital Lego, right? So yeah, and the grid is that it's lining up to things like you can have units of centimeters. So grid snapping would be 100 centimeters, 50 centimeters. I think there's 25 centimeters. But basically, it's picking nice round numbers, and if you make your object to the same size as that, if you have your object, the width of it is 100 centimeters, then you can just duplicate that. And if you have snapping set, it'll lock into the next spot, and it'll line up with the edge. And the reason kind of why I wanted to bring up tiling is it works very similar to this. So, you'll have one picture here, and if you move it, it goes, and it just locks right there, and it's really cool. So as we actually go into the engine, we'll be talking about this a lot more in depth. Basically, it's building an object in a very specific way, making sure that the length, the width, and the height, whatever it needs to snap to, is
Very precise.
Yeah, it's precise, and it's the exact right size. It's really not too hard. You just have to check and make sure you have it working.
Yeah, we'll show you guys later on how to specifically place things using coordinates in Blender.
Yes. So now we can learn about the wonderful world of modifiers. Does anyone want to take a guess what a modifier is, or?
I have to refresh my memory on that one.
I know what they are, but I don't know how to explain it.
It is a little hard to explain.
Special effects, maybe, on objects?
You can, isn't some smooth boys some modifiers? Smooth boys.
Yeah, actually, that would be one of them, yeah. So not shade smoothing, but there's like a turbo smooth in 3ds Max is a modifier.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. So a modifier is kind of like something you can add onto your shape, and it's not permanent until you tell it to be, I guess. So if we take a look here, this thing's called Solidify. I made a bowl, and I cut it in half. So then what Solidify does is it globally applies a modifier to the whole thing, which basically will make a shell for it. Do you see that now it actually has depth? And then it made the inside, and it connected it all up real nice. So that's what Solidify does. But if we look at the image in the middle here, oops. If we look at the image in the middle, it doesn't have any topology around it because it's not applied yet. So we actually can't edit anything until we tell it to be final. So in a way, it's actually like not there. It's just sort of like projected. If you can think of it like that. So
It's like a preview.
it's a preview. It's kind of like, this is what it'll look like, this is what it'll do, but it's not actually there yet until you do it. And that's why modifiers can be seen as non-destructive. So you can actually layer modifiers and do many things with and it doesn't actually apply it to your geometry until you commit it. So it's something we got to consider, I guess.
And solidifying here is just one type. Oh yeah, that just confirmed it.
Yeah, there's a whole
Next slide.
Yeah. So the
Solidify
next.
is, if you're ever familiar with Shell and other programs, it's Shell.
Yes.
Ah,
Blender has its own names.
If Max would be called Shell. Most programs it would be called Shell, and Blender is called Solidify.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be a bit of a learning curve for any of us who don't have, I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but it'll be a learning curve for Max people. Mirror is basically, if we chop something in half, like on the left, it'll apply the other half to it based off of which direction you tell it to go, and then, as you guessed it, you can confirm it, and then it'll basically attach the other half. What's the big advantage to modeling this way?
less time, and you only have to imagine half of the entire object.
Yeah, the big emphasis on the less time component. So if we're making something that is symmetrical, like a bowl or a face or whatever, a face it's not the best example, but it's a good start, and then we can make it asymmetrical later if we need to be. But
a lot of characters can be symmetrical.
Yeah, a lot of characters can be. Vehicles are definitely symmetrical. So if we don't have mirror on, we're trying to guess to make sure things are in the right spot. But if we have mirror turned on, we know it's perfectly symmetrical. It saves us time so you don't have to model the other side of it. There's just a lot of benefits to using mirror. And if we don't have a thing called like snapping or whatever turned on, I think it's like clipping, it means that sometimes we'll have issues connecting the scene together, right? Like this area. Just something to consider when we do get there. I guess we didn't talk about why Solidify is handy, but why do we think?
Like more of a time factor as well, but also I guess on a shape like that, it's really handy because if you want to create that, it's gonna be a weird extrude, right?
Yeah, it would be like I wouldn't actually know how to.
Yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah, like in any other way, like to add depth to it, it'd just be so tough.
Duplicate it and like move it up and scale it. And
like scale it and do weird shit. Yeah, and connect all of them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you could do that. It would just be a horrendous amount of work, and so that's the big thing. I guess that's why I'm teaching you guys modifiers early. Is they save a ton of time. They save a ton of time, and they allow you to kind of do things that you can't always do normal modeling. So as we go, these are the big important ones. There's many modifiers, but these are the big ones, right? Array. What do we think this guy does?
Duplicates. Makes an array of them.
And if we look at the spacing in between, it is exact. So rather than trying to duplicate a bunch of them, so if we're making the Audi logo, right? So the Audi logo has four circles? Yeah, I'm just going to say that it has 4. There's a certain amount of spacing that we have to consider, and it's the same thing, duplicated over. So array is great because it gives us precision, and we can set the spacing in between. Quite nice. It basically duplicates it however many times you tell it to. The next modifier is bevel. So it can be handy, but if you have geometry like this, do you see the huge problem it made? It just took this and then added lots and lots of polys all the way around. Wasn't even really specific to the corners. However, I believe there's ways to maybe alleviate this, so I'll have to look into it to see if there is a way to apply it in certain spots. Typically,
limits or something like that.
Yeah, typically when I bevel, I don't actually use the modifier. I do it while editing because it gives me more control. Otherwise, you'll get issues like this that actually take more time to fix than it is to apply. For screw, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It allows you to make screws. Without the screw modifier, I have no idea how you would do this. It'd be horrible. So basically, you're going to place a circle and then tell it to wrap around a bunch of times. And that gets me into writing another thing down. So circle verse shape. Okay, cool. So we'll have that slide in the future. All right, so next one is, okay, this is kind of opposite of what I was talking about before, but if we're actually animating something, there's a situation where we do want the geometry to be more even. I
Have
guess.
those extra subdivisions in it.
Yeah. So if we want this guy to act like a knee, right? Or if we're making an arm and the arm is bending, and it's sort of like Bender's arm in Futurama. If we're making an arm, we would want it to be more like the thing on the right than the thing on the left, because this doesn't bend that well because it's one giant board. This bends better because we have more information and it can take that and interpolate between them. If you look at these bars on the top, if we just have one single point in the middle, it bends kind of weird. As soon as we add 2, it gets a lot better. We add even more, it actually starts to kind of allow it to bend better. So we don't have to worry about this most of the time, but if we are planning on having something bend for animation, we have to change the way we add information. Basically, economic modeling is kind of like out the window when it comes to animating something. So, but for the most part, we don't have to worry about this too much. So when we get there, we'll definitely talk about it. Does that kind of make sense for you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a more uniform object that has a density that's very similar will bend better if you need it to bend. If it's not bending, it doesn't need to have that type of or moving or whatever. It doesn't need that much polys. Let's learn how to move the camera around, and then we'll call it a night. How about that?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay, cool. And then we can all open it up. So the next thing is before you get too far, do yourself a favor and set up Blender the way you like. And then just so you guys know, it does reset every time you open up a new project. If you send a .blend file to someone, it'll switch the original content user's preferences. So let's go File. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to change our preferences a bit, or make sure we're on the right preferences. So we go Edit up top, and then we click on Preferences, and then it's going to give us this little window. And then next step is we go to Key Map. Okay, so then we go to key map, and then what we want to make sure is we have select with left on, okay? And then the next one is, this is super important, activate gizmo on drag. If it says press, so change it to drag. And I'm pretty sure all you guys have it set to press, so yeah, we want it on drag.
Okay.
The reason why is we'll be selecting, and then the gizmo will get in the way, and then you'll press it, and it'll try to move it, and it'll fuck up your geometry, and you'll get really mad. So before we even get anywhere, we want that to always be on drag. It's also I have a screenshot of this in the slides if we need to refer back to it when we're setting up a new blend file. Okay, so spacebar action. I like to have this guy set to tools or search. Play is annoying. It's so annoying. You'll hit spacebar and it starts playing an animation. We're not at animating yet and we don't need it. So I find tools is nice. If you're into search, you can do that as well. That's the big one for now. And as long as, you know, if, you know what? Okay, yeah, we'll just keep the Blender controls the way it is. There is a way to tell it to change to industry standard if you're into that. And you can also change it back to Blender 2.79.
Is that a drop down at the top?
Yeah, but don't do that because while I'm teaching these tutorials, I'll be using the new Blender 2.8 hotkeys. So you'll be on the wrong hotkeys if you're not. And if you're Dylan, you know all the alternatives already, so he gets an exception. Okay, we'll close out of this.
I don't use the industry one anymore. I use a custom key map.
Oh, okay, there you go.
It's gonna help nobody else.
Yeah, there is one more thing we can do. We'll do this later, and it's on the slides, so don't worry. It's not like you guys will forget. But you can go to preferences, and then you can increase your undo amounts. If you go to preferences, system, undo steps. I crank mine all the way up to the max. I guess you guys are doing that, so I'll just go with you. Yeah, so system, undo steps. I go to 256. If you guys are having performance issues, maybe less than that number. But regardless, I think it's good to have it high so you can undo it if you need to.
256.
Yeah, that's the max you can do. You can also look at like cycles render devices, but you know what? We're not going to be touching that. Yeah, CUDA's nice. Yeah, perfect. So then we can go interface line width. I have mine set to thick. If you guys are having a hard time seeing lines, I recommend using thick. Like if you have a high-res screen or whatever, you're just having a hard time seeing where the edges are, this can be a good trick to making it easier. However, the downside is that sometimes thick is like too much and it might be hard to see. So, you know, just know that it is on the slides, and if you need to change it, you can always do that. You can have it auto, but thick is nice. It's nice and chunky, and I think it's a little bit easier to see. So, I believe we're ready to go. And then to save these preferences, to make sure that we don't have to do this every time we open up a new one, we'll go File, Save As, and then just find your favorite place to save things that, you know, if you're doing a tutorial file naming convention, maybe do that. So I'll save mine in desktop, go to tutorials, 3D modeling, and we're on class number 6. I can call it, Scott, what's our, what do we want to call it?
What's up?
What's up?
Our first. Okay.
Sorry. Our first, you're saying?
Our first child.
I like that. Our first child. .blend. Save as Blender file. So now as soon as you open up our first child.blend, it'll remember all those preferences that we have set. Does anybody have multiple hard drives that they have to navigate through, like a D drive and a? That'd be you.
No.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so this is kind of weird. If you need to go between drives, you can actually go. See on the very top here, it says C users Alex Ivan blah 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 blah. If you go D, and then you go dot or whatever the shortcut is for your drive, and then put the dot and hit enter, it'll take you to that drive instead. It's a bit annoying, but C. I guess it would be colon, and then hit enter, and then now I'm back into my C drive. That's the only annoying thing about saving I don't like, is it's kind of hard to hop between, but whatever.
Yeah, it's a bit annoying.
Yeah.
So, would it, if you save this as the startup file, would that save your preferences every time you open it up?
Oh, geez.
You could, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. I'm pretty
That's file defaults, save startup file.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, that sounds great to me. So go
'Cause-
file. Sorry, what?
I didn't realize, I think in previous versions it just kept your settings between files, so
Okay.
your,
File
like,
default.
your settings.
What did you say it was?
File defaults, you're kind of to the bottom.
Oh, default. Okay, save startup file.
Save. And then you gotta get ready to hit OK. Yeah.
Yeah.
Save startup file.
There we go. Yeah, and now that should be good.
Okay.
Jared with the plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you. All right. So, next thing is navigation. So, this is the really handy part of the slides right here. I think we're on like 48 or whatever number it is. But I went ahead and I actually made kind of cheat sheets. So,
Dope.
really, really handy. This is going to save you a lot of time in remembering and learning the hotkeys. And if you guys have anything else, you guys are all editors, so you can add stuff to this. And if you want to make a new page, go ahead and do that. But I thought this is kind of a nice place. And I do, if you notice the way I did it, I have the actual thing bolded. So like rotate camera is bolded, left mouse select bold. So if you are going to make a thing, just try to copy that kind of convention, and it'll help make it a little bit easier. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to hold down our middle mouse button, and that is going to give us this. Whoa, look at that. Are we all rotating around the world and flying around?
Indeed.
Okay, right on. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hold down shift and then hold the middle mouse button. Wow, look at that.
Holy shit.
Mother
Oh my
God. So that's how we pan. We just hold down shift with middle mouse. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to scroll that little mouse wheel, and it allows us to go in and out. So shift this, it's quite handy, and you can see how you can kind of quickly move around. So the next one is I'm just going to get an object in here right off the bat. So Control A. I apologize, it's actually Shift A. So Shift A, and then we'll click on the cube. Do we all have a happy little cube in there? Okay, great. So let's just try something here. Zoom out a bunch and then move it off to the side. Not too much. We still have to see the cube. Okay, so we're far away. And if you click on the cube with the left button, and then on your numpad, see the dot, delete? It'll take us right back to the cube and reset our camera based off of the object. So first thing we need to do, click on that cube. Okay, so it's selected. And then we hit delete or the period button on the numpad. Specifically on the numpad.
Whoa, oh shit.
Yeah. So really helpful. This is actually really great because I can see where all of you guys are at, so I love that we can share our screens. Anyways. And then anyway, so now if we try the rotate again, you'll see it is around the axis of the cube. Very, very handy. This is like this thing right here. It's called move. It now has the handles, so you can move that bad boy around if we need to. And then to get it back in the middle, we'll hit Alt G. That resets the position back to the center of the world. So we'll move that cube somewhere else, and then to get it back in the world, in the center, we hit Alt G. That'll do that. Very, very cool. So then the next thing is like, hey, I like this cube a lot. I just want to know some more information on it. You need to right click, and then this menu is called the Object Context menu. It is a menu that is contextual, meaning that it pops up when it needs to. So if you don't have the cube selected and you right click, it's not going to give you the same kind of deal, but here we can tell this object to shade smooth, we can tell it to shade flat, we can do all these things. So if I tell it to shade smooth, it looks really weird. But then we can go to flat and it keeps the nice sharp edges again. Alright, next thing is we did zoom in and out, we did pan, we did resetting the camera. Alright, so if we look here, you see how my view is changing. So what's happening is I'm going into edit mode. And how I do that is I hit the tab key. So tab allows us to go into edit mode. When we're in edit mode, we'll see there's lines around the object, and it will show us the edges, the vertexes, and all that fun stuff. So when we're in edit mode, if we hit 1, we'll see dots on the object. That means we can select vertexes. If we hit 2, we don't see the dots, but we see lines, so that means we're in edge mode. So if we click, it'll select different edges, and if we hit 3, we can select faces. And let's go ahead and just practice that real quick. Select a face, click on another face, and then try moving around. And then rotate your camera as you're doing it, zoom in and out, and then try resetting your camera back to that. And actually, do you notice when you have a face selected and you hit the delete, it'll actually zoom in to that face. So whatever you're working on, it'll know to do that. And then the cool thing is if we use the little drag and drop thing that we were moving the cube around before, it'll actually move that face. So I have like a trapezoid now, which is kind of cool. Alright, how are we feeling with that?
Pretty good.
Noise.
Question, because I like using the hotkeys on the keypad to switch between moving and rotation, other transforms. Is there a way to press it and have the gizmo show up and not just automatically start moving around, whichever way I want?
Yeah, good question. So the gizmo is typically just kind of always sort of like there as you're going. That's why I told you guys to have it to press upon keep, like you have to hold it. So if you hold it, it activates it, but if you just press, it won't always it won't activate it, right? I think the gizmo is just kind of a smart, weird gizmo, and it's sort of like something you got to get used to. But otherwise, there is things like if you hit G, it'll move it. It'll free move it. If you hit R, that'll rotate. And then, you know, if you hit S, that scales it. So yeah, I know there is definitely hotkeys for everything in Blender, and you know, scale, X, 0, and then that'll do that. So we can do all kinds of weird things. We don't really want to do that, but yeah, does that kind of help?
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out like how I can get the gizmo to show up whenever I do press the hotkeys, because I find it a little frustrating. Oh, I need to go over here to even bring up the gizmo. Or... It's a first world problem, I mean, but
Yeah.
yeah.
If you hover over the icon, you can see the shortcut for it. So shortcut is spacebar G. Or if you have yours set to tools as it is, it'll just it'll give you all these tools right there. Or you can it shows you move is G, rotate R, S, scale, transform T. So it should do that. Does that kind of help?
Oh yeah, I guess that this whole spacebar is a mobile toolbar. I think I could more than like make up for the weird hotkey thing. But yeah, no, I think that works.
Yeah, and the hotkey should still work though. If you try hitting G, it will move it.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the pressing G and it automatically moves which way.
Yeah, the strange thing about Blender is if you hit G and then Z, see how it locks it to an axis.
Oh, okay, that's actually really nice.
There's a lot of that going on.
You can then type in a number and it'll move it that, like,
amount.
that direction, that amount.
Yeah, because you do that with scale a lot too. Like if you hit scale and then 0, that means make it a scale of nothing. So it'll see how it collapsed my face, scale and 0, S and Z. Sorry, S and then 0 not on the numpad. Okay, so that's kind of like some quick ways to get into that. Now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's try going into different face views. So if we want to get into what I believe is, one is side view, okay? And just so you, yeah, there is a another page just for views, just so you guys know. It looks like this. But if we hit 1 on the numpad, we're in side view. If we hit 7, we'll go to top, right? So 1, 7, 1, 7. The idea is the numpad, you're kind of always hammering away on that. So it's a quick way to go between views. 9, that'll give us, what is that again?
Left orthographic. It says it in the top left corner.
Oh, cool, thank you. Right on. Yeah, left orthographic. Front orthographic. Top orthographic. Okay, so I think I labeled those wrong. I'll rechange the labels. Perfect. Yeah, I didn't even see that. If you take a look at the top left corner, it tells you exactly what it is. So it's no coincidence that the corners in the numpad on the numbers, those are the changed to different views. If you go 8, 4, 6, or 2, see in between the corners, it'll sort of like move up or down by 15-degree increments. Quite cool. If you hit 4, it allows us to move left and right by 15-degree increments. If you hit 5, it takes perspective on or off, changing it to orthographic. So currently, right now, I'm looking at it in orthographic, like this, and then now it's in perspective. Orthographic, perspective. How do we feel about that for right now?
But Alex, what does orthographic and perspective mean?
Thank you, Jared. Orthographic means there is.
Perspective.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain it without using the word perspective. It means that everything is lined up. Oh, geez, how do I?
Nothing converges.
Thank you. Nothing converges. There's no vanishing points. There's nothing like that. Have you ever?
Another way to say it would be like isometric.
Yeah, isometric is it utilizes orthographic. Isometric is also kind of specific to the fact that it's also the angles as well. So it's orthographic, and you have this kind of thing going on. So that would be isometric. And if I did this, it's no longer isometric. But once the X and the Y direction become 30 degrees, it's now isometric. So, have you guys ever, do we know a little bit about photography and what the different lenses do? You know, like when you put a long lens on, like a telephoto lens, and you zoom in really far? The more you zoom in, the less perspective there is. So if you notice, the background gets bigger, like it kind of almost gets like mountains or something like that. When you use a telephoto lens, it gets quite a lot bigger than if you use like a wide angle lens. And if you have orthographic, that's to the utmost extreme, because technically it doesn't matter based off of distance. So I think I'll make a example of this. You know, if I grab my object and if I duplicate it a bunch, let me just do this and you can see. So things in the background will be the exact same size as things in the foreground with orthographic. Okay, so if I'm taking a look here at this, you see these cubes are kind of like doing their thing. But see what happened when I changed it to orthographic? Okay, now watch.
You can really see the difference in like front view.
Oh yeah. But do you see the difference? That's perspective. This is called foreshortening. When an object gets close to the camera or the viewport, it gets a lot bigger and it distorts. In orthographic, there's no such thing. It's just like the shape is the shape. So we'll be using that
camera with a really, what is it, wide lens?
Yeah, this one would be a wide angle.
Like infinitely wide angle lens.
Oh, you mean like orthographic is, or perspective?
Or I think it's orthographic, right?
Orthographic would be a camera with an infinite zoom. It would be like
infinite
zoom lens. Yeah. Doesn't quite matter at the end of the day. All we need to know is orthographic helps us to model without having to deal with perspective, because perspective is a huge pain in the ass sometimes when we're modeling.
There is no perspective in orthographic. It's
like
draft drawings.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is.
There's no perspective in those.
Yeah, everything runs parallel to the camera. So I think that's probably a good time to stop. One more thing before we leave is if you hit Control and 1, it'll go to the other side. So
I think the numpad does that too, doesn't it?
Yeah. When I hit 1, I'm on front, right? And if I hit Control and 1, I'm on back. So that's how I get to see the other side of it. If I hit 3 and then I hit Control and then 3, it'll take me from right to left, right? And then if I hit 7, I'm looking at the top, hit Control and then 7, and now I'm looking at the bottom.
There's also the gizmo in the top right corner.
Yeah. Okay. Do you guys see this thing? Sorry about that, Jared. Yeah. So if you click and drag around, you can use this gizmo to rotate the camera. If you see the little hand here, you can drag the hand and you can move that way. You can zoom in and out by dragging on the magnifying glass. And then there's a toggle camera view, which we won't use that much. Switch.
I think a lot of those controls are made for like laptop users.
Yeah, exactly.
Have easy access to numpad.
So, yeah, I think that was a pretty good intro to Blender. It's nice because when I learn a program, I find this stuff, it takes the longest time to get used to. So, I guess now I'll say, if we can mess around with this, just open up Blender, try to make shapes, see where we can go from here on, and see if you learn anything just on yourself. Just try out a bunch of shit, and if it all goes bad, hit X and don't save. Otherwise, it just to get familiar with rotating the camera, moving things around, doing really simple stuff. That's basically the homework for the weekend. It's not really too much. Just try to get familiar with getting comfortable with the layout. You know, if you go Control and then if you hold Alt while rotating around, you know, holding the middle mouse button down, it'll lock it to a view. So you can try stuff like that. It's these things that allow you to model quickly and without frustration, because you're not trying to figure out how to rotate or navigate at the same time. So yeah, good job everybody. I think that's it for today. I'm gonna cut it off there.
Okay.
Right on. See you Tuesday. Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful.
You're gonna rickroll it soon, yo. I could just see it.
One of these days. Oh, you ruined it though. But you know what? Actually, it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, because you don't know when it's gonna happen. So you guys are both getting rickrolled and not at the same time. For sure.
We got I'm anticipating now.
One of these days, it'll not be the yeah.